Morning, guys. How you doing? So I have two good news, one good news and one bad news. Uh, the same. So the same news we had the other day, right? So no rats. Seriously? Seriously? But then since you studied, that's good. So everyone will get full mark on that for today. Everybody who attended, of course. So first of all, let me get this distributed, or actually it might be faster if I can get one person from each team to pick up, the sign-in sheet. And so what we'll have to do, so just, pick one and share with the others. So, sorry. Thank you. I know this is much faster than me going around the table. Sorry. Right. Okay. Sorry. There we go. I should do this every time. Thank you. Okay, so how was the material? Dense, right? Okay, that's fine. So I'll make sure we go through everything today. So I'll make sure you master everything today, okay? In today's lecture. So we'll start. That's right. So the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna go, section by section, have you guys read, and then me ask you questions, and make sure everything is clear. At the end of the session, at the end of today's lecture, once we finish, I will pull the practice exercise I had on Canvas, as well as some applications I used from last time, as well as some RAT questions from last year. We'll go through them and answer them, like a team, just like team applications. So make sure you have your boxes, okay? So let's start by the anti-diabetic agent. So hopefully you have your notes with you. Everybody has their notes. You have your notes with you guys? Okay, so thank you. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna look at is the factors that affects the insulin release and the blood sugar level, okay? So as you see in the notes, we have several hormones or neurotransmitters or proteins that affect the sugar level, okay? So can you, I assume you have read this already, can you like name them? What's the first one? Insulin. What does insulin do? It, it, it lowers the glucose level in the blood. What about glucagon? Okay, how does it do that? gluconeogenesis, so it's like synthesis of glucose, which is gluconeogenesis, and then glycogen, which is, you know, a bunch of glucose together, glycogen lysis. So it breaks down the glycogen, okay? Okay, what about the, of course, catecholamines and cortisol? They increase the sugar level. You've guys heard of the glucocorticoid? Okay, so anytime you take something like, for example, you know, cortisone, prednisone, anything of this, they increase the sugar level. So that's why if someone is diabetic, you want to be careful if you ever give them a cortisol, you know, glucocorticoids. In fact, that's why they are called glucocorticoid. Okay, and of course the catecholamines, like, you have a question, Kevin? No. So catecholamines like, you know, norepinephrine and epinephrine, these are sympathetic neurotransmitters, which means it gets you into the fight and flight stage. And in this case, they need more sugar or less sugar. You need more sugar in your blood. So these would increase the sugar level, okay? And then we have amylin, which is decrease the gastric empty and therefore enhanced glucose absorption. Does that make sense? So it actually slows down the gastric empty, slow down the process of the GI. It allows the food to stay in the GI longer amount of time such that the sugar can be absorbed, okay? So when the sugar is absorbed, then you have more sugar into the circulation. So it increases the sugar level in the blood, okay? And then, so as we read through these, you can imagine the mechanism of action of these anti-diabetic drugs, right? So we will see that we have amylin inhibitor, for example. And then, of course, you know, we have insulin, and then we have glucagon. In our case, we want to, you know, give insulin or inhibit glucagon. And then we have two hormones called incretins. These are the glucagon-like peptide. From the name, it's like a glucagon. It will do the same job as glucagon. So we want to inhibit that, okay? And then we have glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, GIP. So these would promote the synthesis and the secretion of the insulin. So actually we want to promote that, I'm sorry, because glucagon would increase the synthesis and secretion of insulin. I got confused for a minute. Right, so these two hormones, the GLP and the GIP, would promote the synthesis and secretion of insulin, okay? So, any questions about this so far?
Reverse acting, like glucagon almost sounds like, oh, glucose is promotes insulin. I don't know. I may be just confused. Maybe it does this and some does this, and then glucagon also.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the name, I see your point. The name glucagon-like peptide, you would think it should act like glucagon, and glucagon should glucagon, yeah. So I'll check on that, okay? We'll see. When we, yeah, no, I see your point. I got confused myself the first time. Okay, so these two proteins, they enhance the synthesis and secretion of insulin, but I'll check on the name glucagon-like peptide because you would think it would do the same as glucagon, and glucagon should, you know, increase the glucose. So exactly, yeah. So, okay. So everything clear so far except for the GLP? Okay, so these are the hormones involved in the regulation of the insulin and the glucose. As we will see, we will target these hormones and design drugs to reduce the glucose in the blood. Is the glucose transferred into the cell through passive transport or active? Active. Okay. What are the type of transporters that transfer the glucose? Say it again. Yes, the GLUT, that's right, the glucose transport. And there is another one, the SGLT, which is the sodium glucose transport. Okay, so we have two kinds of transporters, guys, that transport the glucose inside the cell, GLUT and the SLGT. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Insulin promote what? I'm sorry. Glycolysis. You mean like glycogen lysis?
Is that glycolysis?
No. What if it does in the cell or something once it's in? It could be that it actually promotes glycolysis in the cell once it's importing it, but not glycogenolysis, which makes it almost kind of confusing. Because when she said it at first,
right.
So if you're importing glucose, the cell, it may also signal the cell to use it.
Right.
So that could be what it is. And then and when she said it, it clicked and it didn't click in my head. I was thinking of glycolysis and glycogenolysis is the same thing. So I could see that someone else thinking.
I'm honestly
it's not the same thing.
Right. This is I'm honestly not sure. So this is too much biochemistry. So
but glycolysis takes place in the cell, so it may actually cause glycolysis in the cell since you're bringing it in. I mean, things tend to work that way.
well, are you referring to this glycogenolysis? Okay. Okay, I'm not sure about that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, that's fine.
It's not in our notes from last for this coming thing, and we don't have it on the test.
So you actually had studied biochemistry for the glucose and.
Well, we worked on glycolysis and stuff, so there may be a word in there that it is influenced by insulin. I'm not sure, and it sounds familiar because the body seems to work the way.
Okay. Okay. Okay, let's focus back to the notes. So I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the biochemistry of. I have to review this. It's been a while, but for the sake of today's lecture, I don't think we're gonna need to know this. The answer to your question, but I'll be glad to find out this for you if you want to. Okay. Okay. So back to the regulation of the glucose release and absorption. We mentioned that there are two different types of transporters. We have the GLUT, okay, and we have the SLGT. Now, the difference between these two is one of them promotes or encourage the absorption of the glucose at different tissues of our body, like in the liver, brain, and all these parts that need the glucose to get the energy. The other one is actually at the pancreas, which is the SGLT, is located at the pancreatic cell. And the function of the SGLT is different than the GLUT. Let me show you the figure. So the first one here, the GLUT, okay. This works as a result of stimulation of the insulin by binding to the insulin receptor, and then the signal transduction results into the transfer of the GLUT to the cell membrane to allow the glucose to get in. So, as you know, in order for the sugar to be absorbed, in order for the cells to be able to get the sugar in, they will need the insulin, right? Yes, there are transporters inside these cells, but they are not activated and they are not transferred into the membrane until the insulin binds to these cells. Okay? So there are two kinds of transporters. The first ones we're going to talk about are the GLUT. These GLUT are stored in vessels. Okay? They are stored inside the cell. And they are not activated. They do not go outside at the cell membrane until the insulin binds to the receptor of that cell. Make sense, guys? So once the insulin binds, it stimulates through a signal transduction, several steps involved that leads to release of the GLUT such that it can actually go to the cell membrane and absorb the glucose inside the cell. This is why insulin is important. Now imagine if we have already the GLUT transporters at the membrane, do you think we would need insulin? No. So without insulin, our cells will not be able to absorb the sugar. Okay? So that's the first type of transporter. Any questions about that? Yes, Nodi.
You said insulin binds to the insulin binds, which leads to signal transduction, which leads to the release of GLUT, so it can go to the cell membrane
and absorb the glucose. Okay, so these GLUT are glucose transporters, glucose transports. So they have to be outside in the cell membrane to allow the glucose to get in. Okay, without insulin, they are normally not attached to the cell membrane. They just stay inside the cell. Okay, is that clear, guys? So why do you look confused? Was it because of the first paragraph of the gluconeogenesis and all that? Yes. Actually, no. It applies to all the GLUT, but we only talked about GLUT4 as the most commonly used one. Okay. So that's a good question. Does it only apply to GLUT4, GLUT4? No. The only reason they have GLUT4 because it's the most commonly used one in most of our cells. Okay. Still confused faces. What's up? Talk to me. Melody, Maria. That's a good question. Anytime we have a transport protein that performs such a job will need energy. That's why it's called active transport. Yes. Well, it depends. So if you have too much sugar, then see the problem with the sugar not being able to cross the membrane because it's too much polar, too much hydrophilic. So it will need the energy to get the sugar inside the cell. Guys, so why does not the sugar transport inside the cell by itself through passive transport? It's polar, right? Have you looked at the structure of the glucose? Lots of OHs. So it cannot transfer by itself. It cannot get inside the cell by itself. It will need some sort of transporter to do that.
Is acid transport, if it is down its concentration gradient, which I'm not saying it is, but passive transport, if it were glucose to here and then a transporter that just let it through, driven by the concentration gradient, would that be passive transport? When you use a transporter.
Well, so passive means it does not need energy, and normally passive will need, will move with the, the concentration gradient, not against it.
Not only is it won't pass, but it's also got a gradient issue as well, so it has to be active, right?
Well, right. So active does it could be with the concentration gradient or against. In this case, it could be either way. As long as it involves a transporter and needs energy, then it's active.
Okay. In the kidney, is it passive?
Where? What are we talking about? The cell itself?
In the kidney brush border.
Well, anytime you have,
Or
you
is
know,
it in the nephron? Like, I can't remember. Oh. It's not the brush board, but it's in the, when it goes out the, what is it, leak with the nephron, or does it just, do you have a?
oh yes,
Gradients, the nephron, right?
yes.
They saturate the.
It will need,
downstream.
will in this case, it will need actually transporters to pass the membrane. Yes.
They're passive.
Um,
Are they? I don't know, because sometimes it's going against the grade. I mean, sometimes. It's
okay, we can talk about this after class.
Sometimes it's going with the grade.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, guys. What's up? You look distracted, confused. What's up? Huh? It's Friday. Is it? I know it's Friday. I mean, why? Like, talk to me. So, I could, instead of solving applications, I assumed that you didn't have time to look at the material because it's condensed. So I'm trying to do this, traditional lecturing, basically. Okay? But stay with me, okay? Don't get distracted. I can tell just by looking at your faces. I can read your faces, okay? This is one of my powerful, yeah. Yes, sir.
How does
Gastric emptying?
yeah, how does it?
Oh, so basically, gastric emptying mean like, the food moving, through the GI and leaving the body. Okay. So amylin, the amylin, the protein amylin, slows down the gastric empty process. So it allows more time for the sugar to be absorbed. Okay. Yes. Yes.
I thought it was this is an amylin agonist. There's a drug that's an amylin agonist.
Well, it should be, you mean antagonist, you mean? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
That would reduce the levels of glucose, blood glucose.
If it increases the absorption of the glucose, then it will increase the glucose in the blood.
Oh,
Okay.
but insulin,
Mm-hmm.
it says that it decreases absorption, or no, it opens up the tissues and the cells to more uptake into the tissues.
Yes. So insulin. So guys, without insulin, our cells will not be able to get the sugar inside the cells. Why is that? So without insulin, the sugar will increase in the blood, right? You'll have more sugar concentration in the blood. Why is that? And our body will not be benefiting from the sugar. Basically, you will have lots of sugar available in your circulation, but you're weak. You're not able. Your cells are not able to use it. Okay. Why is that? It's because of this. When insulin binds to the outside insulin receptor at the membrane, it stimulates the release of this transport. And this transport now will move, see this arrow here, moves outside to the cell membrane such that it can, transfer the glucose inside. Okay? If you got this 100%, can you raise your hand? Okay. Now, this is one type of the transport. The second type is actually at the pancreatic cells, which is the GLUT. I'm sorry, SGLT. No, I think. Okay, I made a mistake. Okay, it's actually, I mean, what we said so far is correct, except it's the GLUT2 is the one at the pancreatic cells. Okay, so we have GLUT4 at the cell membrane, at the, you know, that is stimulated to transfer the glucose. Okay, these are stored in vessels, and then upon the stimulation of the insulin, they leave outside to the membrane, and they recruit, they allow the glucose to get in. Now the GLUT number two is the one that is at the pancreatic cells, and this one is always at the cell membrane, and when the sugar gets inside the cell, it stimulates the release of the insulin. So in this case, when you have more sugar in your in your blood, then it gets absorbed inside the beta cells, and then it tells the body that there's too much sugar, let's release insulin. Okay, then the insulin is actually through this signal transduction method is stored in the vessels, and then it's released. It's like the opposite of what we've seen, except, I mean, so basically you have the GLUT in the cell membrane, and then it stimulates the release of the insulin from these vessels. Okay. I'm sorry about the confusion. I thought it's the SLGT, but it's the GLUT number 2. Melody.
I just had a question going back to the first thing you talked about. You said there's 2 hormones called incretins, those are GIP and GLP.
Yes.
And we want to enhance those.
So these will stimulate the synthesis and production of insulin. So we want to enhance these. Okay. So we want to design agonists for these. Okay. So what's the difference between the figure we've seen earlier and this one? Say it again. So what's the difference between this figure and the one we've seen earlier? Huh? Excellent. Okay, so it's like the opposite. In the one before, we had insulin binding, stimulates the release of the GLUT4. GLUT4 goes outside to the cell membrane, allow insulin inside. Here it's the opposite. This is the pancreatic cell, okay? So this is the beta cells. They have GLUT2, which is already at the membrane. When you have too much sugar, they sense, the sugar gets inside the beta cells, and then they stimulate the release of the insulin from these vessels. So in this case, we have insulin stored, and it's only released when you have too much sugar outside, in a way to control the sugar. The other one, we have insulin receptor at the other, tissues, cells, and the insulin binds, and it stimulates the GLUT4 to get outside and then let the sugar in. Yes, Vivian.
I don't know if it's relevant, but the role of the channels, the potassium and calcium, I kind of did not really understand that. I'm going to try to like pick together. So are you able to
Okay. Okay, sure. So we'll talk about this signal method, but first let me make sure you guys got the difference between this one and the one before. So any questions? Morgan. Yes, I'm sorry. Earlier I thought it's the SGLT at the pancreatic cell. It's actually, yes. So 4 and 2. Yes, ma'am. So both are glucose transport. GLUT2 is always attached to the cell membrane of the beta cells, okay? But GLUT4 is stored in vessels, and it's only released upon the binding of insulin to its receptor. No, we're talking about glucose. So GLUT2 only transport glucose inside the beta cells, and the transport of the glucose stimulates this circle that leads to the release of the insulin.
So basically, what you're saying is that this receptor is the sensor the pancreas uses. So
Yes.
when it's in there, it releases insulin.
Thank you. So GLUT2 act like a sensor, but it's actually once the glucose is inside, it stimulates, as a sensor to tells the beta cells that we have too much sugar outside, and then insulin is released. Yes. Yes, let me actually have you say that.
No, because I don't remember what I
No,
said.
that's fine. Say it.
Okay. So what I got from it is that there's too much sugar outside the cell, which stimulates the GLUT2 to bring in the glucose, which releases the insulin to counteract the outside sugar, because insulin lowers the sugar level in the blood. Yay, nay?
Perfect. Yeah, excellent. Yes, ma'am.
So the GLUT2 has to, so there's an excess of glucose in your blood, and the GLUT2 is going to signal the insulin, will then signal the GLUT4.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So that's a good point. So after all, when the insulin is released, right? So insulin is released. Now the insulin is going to circulate and reach the other tissues, and then bind to the receptor, and then think about the other figure. The other figure where the insulin binds to the receptor and then stimulates the GLUT4 to go to the outside of the membrane, outside bind to the membrane, and then let the sugar get inside. That's the sugar. That's how the sugar gets in. Thank you so much for putting these two together.
So that's how the insulin knows that there is too much excess glucose in the blood, is through the GLUT2 transporter.
Exactly. That's how the pancreatic beta cells know that there is too much sugar, through the GLUT2 transporter. So the sugar gets in, it stimulates the release of the insulin, and then insulin binds to the other cells and enhance the absorption of the sugar. Yes, sir. I'm not sure, to be honest. I know it's generally glucose, but I'm not sure which one. Okay, that's fine, but I mean, we're not worried about that. Are you guys chatting or talking about the figures? Okay, so take a minute, talk about that as a team, and come up with questions. Cheryl. Never mind. Sure.
Glucose insulin to do the glucose transportation, but GLUT2 does not do that. So we backtrack that it doesn't, like, not all, because you basically said earlier in class that it applies to all food that it needs insulin for glucose to be absorbed in the cell. When you see GLUT2 is an exception. I'm just making sure that don't ask, like, if you put it on the test and you're at GLUT2 doesn't apply to
Okay, guys, are we clear? All right, so you got the job of the GLUT2 and GLUT4 and how the whole circle of the insulin release and glucose. No? You got that? Can you raise your hand if you got this 100%? Okay. Any questions about this so far? Okay, the next part is how the insulin bind to the receptor. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So this is the signal transduction that Vivian was asking about. So when glucose gets in, somehow it blocks this channel from working, okay? And then it depolarizes the inside of the cell and stimulates for the calcium to get inside and the release of the insulin happen. So one of the functions of the other antidiabetic drugs is to also inhibit this channel. So this picture here shows the channel, okay? And we have the sulfonylurea drugs receptor. So SUR is sulfonylurea receptor. These are receptors at the potassium channel. They block the channel and they increase the secretion of insulin. That's why they are called secretogoogies, something like that. Okay, secretogoogies. Yeah, say it again. I know. If I call it, you're gonna say it like me. So the potassium channel is actually inhibited once the sugar gets inside. It's inhibited, so it depolarizes. It stimulates the calcium to get inside, and then insulin is released. So the job of the drug here is to block this channel. Once it does that, then it secretes the insulin. Okay. So how do you pronounce it? I'm curious now. Huh? Want me to bring the term for you? Yes. Yes, they block not the calcium, the potassium. Okay, so this channel here, everyone, this shows a top view of the channel, the potassium channel, right here. Okay, so by blocking this channel, these are receptors for the sulfonylurea, SUR, sulfonylurea receptors. So by binding to these receptors, they block the channel, potassium channel, and that's how they stimulate the release of insulin. Okay, they stimulate the secretion of insulin. As you will see, there are certain drugs that stimulate the release of insulin, and there are other drugs that stimulates the sensitivity to the insulin. Okay, like the metformin, for example, is one of the drugs that stimulate the sensitivity. They make the cells more sensitive to the insulin. Okay. Right, so we're talking about this figure here, the GLUT number 2. Oh, no. Right, so the other transporter were, are just other examples. Yes, we'll talk about the GLUT. So the mechanism of metformin. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay. So Melody. They target the potassium channel. The sulfonylurea drugs, they target the potassium channel. And so they block the channel, okay? So they depolarize the cell, and the depolarization enhance the inside, letting this calcium channel work. So calcium gets inside, and then it stimulates the release of the insulin. Yes, Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So in normal people like who don't have diabetes, when like you were saying earlier, when glucose comes in, it automatically puts it to the potassium channel. So if you like if people who have like diabetes, that doesn't happen when glucose comes in. So that's why you anti-diabetics to block it.
Well, so if you have diabetes, there are two kinds of problems. Either you're not able to release insulin, okay? Or there is insulin, but the receptor is not able to sensitize them. They don't work for that insulin, okay? So there is, type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So in the case of type 1, you have insulin, but you're not able to, the cells are not able to use the insulin, either because the insulin itself is defective or because something is wrong here with the way the insulin receptor work. In type 2, you do not have enough insulin. Your body does not produce enough insulin. So your job is either to administer insulin or increase the secretion of insulin, like with the secretagogues, or increase the sensitivity of the cells to the insulin, like the metformin. So far, so good? Okay, can we talk about the insulin receptor now? Okay, so the insulin receptor is plasma membrane bound. It has two parts, outside the cell and inside the cell, okay? So the part that's outside the cell is mainly the alpha subunits, right here, okay? And then the beta subunits are mainly inside the cell. So when the insulin binds, it changes the conformation of the receptor and stimulates through some processes here. It stimulates the GLUT number 4 to be released from the vessels and bind outside to the, stay outside to the cell membrane and allow the glucose in. Okay, so this is the insulin receptor. It's at the interface the cell membrane of the cell, and part of the receptor is outside, part of it is inside. The part that's outside is mainly the alpha subunit. This is the units, the alpha subunit, where the insulin binds to, okay? Once it binds, it changes the conformation. Remember the change of the conformation that leads to the somehow change of the conformation inside the cell. So insulin binds, change that, it would change this as well, and then stimulates a signal transduction that leads to the GLUT4 to get outside. Okay, so insulin receptors has two parts, alpha, beta. The outside is alpha, inside is beta. Which part does the insulin bind to? Alpha. Okay, clear? Okay. Next, I want to talk about the insulin itself, the structure of the insulin. But before I do that, any questions so far? Yes, ma'am. Yes, correct. Sure. Right, so guys, the details about the signal transduction itself, I'm not concerned about, okay? I just want you to get the general idea of how things work so we could apply this when we talk about drugs, okay? So only if there is something that is a target, is a drug target, then I will highlight it because we're gonna use that, okay? Okay, now as far as the insulin, we have pro insulin, and we have pro-insulin, and we have insulin, okay? So our body synthesizes the pro insulin, and then it breaks down into the pro-insulin. This is the pro-insulin, okay? This is the structure for the proinsulin, which has insulin, which is chain A, chain B here, okay? And that's insulin by itself. Now, if you add chain C, it becomes the proinsulin. So as you can imagine, proinsulin is everything here, and then insulin is by breaking the bond between these two amino acids here and here, okay, through these two enzymes, the PC1 and PC2. I can't remember what PC stands for. Prohormone, yeah, prohormone cleavage, convertase, I'm sorry. Prohormone convertase 1 and 2. Yes, ma'am. Okay, explain it to you, yes. So we have pro insulin. This structure shows the proinsulin, okay? Proinsulin is composed of two parts. Insulin, which is chain A and B, and then chain C, if it's added to the insulin, it's proinsulin. So this whole thing is proinsulin. If you cut these two parts, you get rid of part C, and then you are left with part A and B, and this is the insulin. So chain A and B are the insulin. If you think about the insulin by itself, once you cut this part, then it's basically two chains, A and B, that are linked through disulfide bonds. Make sense? Okay. Yes, ma'am. So the way our body works is you actually synthesize the proinsulin, and then it breaks down into proinsulin, and then it's broken down into insulin. Yes, so the pre-pro is not shown here, okay? So this is only the proinsulin. Are you guys familiar with the recombinant DNA technology? rDNA technology? No. Okay, so you know how Escherichia E. coli bacteria, they divide fast. So they have, DNA that they use to synthesize protein. You know how DNA is translated into RNA, then transcript into protein, okay? So with the recombinant DNA technology, they insert the DNA code required to synthesize the proinsulin. They insert it as part of the DNA for that bacteria. And they let the bacteria grow, okay, and produce all these proinsulins, okay? So you have now a bunch of them, and you collect that and then treat them with the prohormone convertase to convert them to the insulin, okay? Before this technology, they used to rely on insulin from animals, okay? Like bovine or porcine, okay? But these are very similar to our insulin, except they have some minor changes, and for some people, they could be allergic to that, okay? So these are the old way, the old ways of using insulin. We had issues with sensitivity and allergies. So the newer ones are the ones where we use the rDNA technology, recombinant DNA technology, where they actually insert part of the DNA that's responsible for, coding the proinsulin, and then that's how insulin is collected from these bacteria. Make sense? Right. Questions about this part? Yes, sure. Yes. So yeah. I was gonna ask this question, but I want to make sure the technology is clear. But this was the next thing in my mind. Thank you, Cheryl. Like she reads my mind. Scary. Yeah, scary. Questions? So is the RNA, the recombinant DNA technology clear? Yes, sir.
So the importance of the C chain is that it can be altered to increase the duration of action.
No, not really, but we'll get to that point. Why the importance of the, I mean, as far as the duration of action, we're looking at these two amino acids. We'll talk about that. Okay. The importance of the C chain has to do with her question over there.
And we,
No question. You want to answer also ask questions. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
when we add the PC1 and 2, we do include with the insulin C-peptide, is that correct? Or,
Oh, so this is, so PC1 are enzymes.
right, so we get the E. coli.
Yes. So when we, so the E. coli, E. coli will produce for us the proinsulin.
Now, when we package this for patients, it includes the C-peptide for...
No.
Oh,
No.
so does the body secrete the C-peptide?
No, we treat proinsulin with these enzymes before anything. So yeah, that's a very good question. So we use the bacteria. Bacteria is going to produce proinsulin. We collect the proinsulin, and then we use the enzymes PC1, PC2 to break down the C peptide chain. So now we have insulin by itself, and that's the one we're going to use to treat patients.
So physiologically, when a nurse decides she's going to pretend to have diabetes and she injects herself and collapses, she's missing the C-peptide, but if she really had
No.
endogenous insulin problems...
No. So, okay, so, and this goes in line with his question, her question, which is, why do we include the C-peptide? So but before that, I want to make sure you guys understand, before this, I want to make sure you understand the rDNA technology. Is everybody, was it clear to everyone? Raise your hand if it is clear. Okay, good. So next step now, why don't we code only the insulin? Why do we have the code the proinsulin, collect it and then treat it with the PC1 and then use the insulin? Why don't we code the insulin by itself in the bacteria, and then it would produce the insulin immediately and not have to worry about cutting this part? No, not the cysteine proteins, no. What does that mean? No. I like the way you're thinking though. Kevin. You need the shape, that's important. So the C part, guys, will help the protein fold in the right way. Without it, if you only, okay, well, first of all, if you only synthesize the protein, I mean the insulin by itself, which you will not be able to do, by the way, in the bacteria, but if you chemically find a chemical, synthetic, which is going to be like a really crazy way to synthesize this large molecule, but let's pretend that you are able to do that. If you do this synthetically, okay, like, you're such a good organic chemist, you look at this part and then you synthesize it, find a way to synthesize it. If you do that, it is not going to fold in the correct way. Now, remember, protein has many single bonds, and these single bonds will produce different conformations. And some of these conformations are active, some of them are not. The C part, the presence of the C peptide part will help the protein fold or be present in one conformation. Once it's there, then you can cut this part and then you will have the active conformation of the insulin. Now, when I say conformation, I assume you already know what a conformation is, right? Okay, I don't have to visit this again. So a conformation, insulin will not be in the correct conformation if it wasn't for the C part. Okay, but there is one thing also that why can't we let the bacteria synthesize only the A and B? How are these? Exactly, they're separate. It's like having two proteins separate, and it's like trying to have the bacteria synthesize one part and then the other part and then make sure they are connected. It's not going to happen. It's like, right, so that's the second reason why we synthesize the pro-insulin, that because it has the C peptide. I mean, why do we have to have the C peptide when you synthesize the insulin? Because we cannot separate them from each other. We cannot separate these two parts when we synthesize the insulin. So first we'll have the bacteria synthesize everything for us, okay? And then we'll treat it and separate the insulin. You got these two reasons, guys? Was it clear? Can I repeat it? Okay. Well, I actually would like one of you to repeat it, because if I say it, I'm gonna say it the same way, and then probably not gonna get it. But when you hear it from a different way of explaining. Any volunteers? Someone want to explain for us, except Adishola? Just you want to explain? He's like, no. Okay.
So we need the pro-insulin or the pre-pro-insulin?
What do you think? Okay, so we need the pro-insulin. I mean, using the pre-pro-insulin will only give us more work, and we don't have to. I mean, we could just use the pro-insulin. But why could not we use the insulin, not the pro-insulin? This is the question I was trying to explain. So can someone answer this question? There are two reasons why do we use the pro-insulin, and why do we include the C peptide chain? Kendra, you want to explain it? Let me bring the mic so everyone can hear.
Okay, so you can't separate the two parts of the chain, the A and B. So that's one reason why we synthesize pro-insulin and not just regular insulin. The second, as Kevin mentioned, helps with the shape. It folds in the correct way.
Thank you so much. Does it make sense? Good? Okay. All right. So everyone got this? Raise your hand. Cool. All right. So how are you doing so far? So how is the insulin stored? How is insulin stored in our body? As a monomer, dimer, hexamer? Hexamer, okay. Which form of insulin? Well, first of all, you know what's a monomer, what's a dimer, what's a hexamer, right? How is the insulin stored in which form in our body? The answer? What do you think? Hexamer. So, monomer means one insulin, dimer means two insulin units together, hexamer means like 6 insulin units. So it is stored in the hexamer, which means 6 insulin units together, okay? But it can also present in the dimer form. Which form does the insulin have to be in order to be active? Monomer? Okay, we all know it's the monomer, okay. Now, the next part is how do we enhance the structure of the insulin to design all these immediate actin, short actin, long actin, ultra long actin, and ultra long actin. So can you think of, do you need a minute to read this page? Okay, so I want you to read this page and then hopefully we'll share together the techniques used to affect the duration of action, whether make it immediate or make it long duration. There are certain techniques, okay? So read this page and then we'll discuss together, summarize together what are the techniques used, okay? Question? Let's take 7.5 minutes break. Okay, guys. So go ahead and read this page and try to summarize the ways to affect the duration of action of the insulin, how these immediate acting, short, long acting, ultra long acting are working, okay? So we're gonna, discuss together, summarize them all together, okay? So, I know you have read the notes hopefully already, but, just to be sure, let's take like maybe less than 5 minutes. Okay, I assume you're ready, right? Everyone is ready? Okay, so if you look through the notes, there is one key concept or one key factor we're trying to use in affecting how these insulin are released either immediately or slowly. What is it? Huh? Solubility, right? So the ability of the insulin to form dimer or hexamer. So if we want it to be, immediate or fast act, what do we do with the solubility? Increase the solubility. Right? And if we want it to also be released faster, should we encourage the insulin to form dimer or hexamer or discourage that? Discourage that, right? So this is one of the ways which is actually in the case of the immediate release. So the immediate release is actually faster than the regular insulin itself, okay? So we modified 2 of the amino acids at the, terminal insulin such that the resulting insulin cannot form the dimer. So when we administer the insulin, it cannot form dimer, it stays in the monomer form and it's released faster. So this is one technique, which is the, making the insulin be released faster. Okay, regular insulin we're gonna skip because, this is the normal one. We have resources, different techniques for making the rDNA, the recombinant DNA technology. But then we have the short actin and the immediate actin and the long actin. And we have seen several ways to reduce the solubility or encourage the formation of dimer or hexamer to delay the release of insulin, right? Can you name them? Like, can you name one of them and then we'll, explain each one? Add zinc. So how many zincs? 2 or 4. So if you add 2, what happens? You get which effect? You get the intermediate effect. So what does the zinc do? It delays, but how? Through formation of hexamer. It encourages the formation of hexamer or dimer. Well, actually, let's see. So zinc ion acetate dissolves slowly. It does not actually say what it just makes it. It does not help. It affects the insulin solubility, right? So insulin as a protein, do you think it's negatively charged or positively charged? Just by knowing that about the zinc and protamine. It's a protein, it has amino acid, it depends on the amino acids, but it's mostly negatively charged. So when you administer it with a zinc ion, they bind with the insulin, they prevent the insulin release, and then the insulin stays longer, in the body as it's being, slowly released. Now, if you add 4, then you get the other kind, which is the long-acting insulin, okay?
Yeah, what she pointed out on page 3, it talks about 2 making a hexamer, but that's in the separate section from the part where you're talking about the solubility. So.
Okay. So one way is adding the zinc with our 2 or 4. Of course, adding 4 will make it even less soluble. It will stay longer. What about the other ways? Can you name other ways? Other techniques of extending the duration of action of insulin? So pH, it's true, but it has to do with something else too. Yeah, isoelectric. So we change the amino acids such that the drug will be isoelectric. What is isoelectric? it has a net charge of 0. So positive with negative charge, a net charge of 0. So then the drug will not be soluble. And again, solubility, less soluble means it's going to stay longer in the body, right? So, but why when we prepared the drug, we prepared it in pH 4? So when we use this technique of modifying the amino acids such that the drug is isoelectric at pH of 7, so it's isoelectric at pH of 7, then it's not going to dissolve. It has a longer duration of action. But when we prepared the solution, when we prepared this drug, we prepared it at pH 4. Why is that? So it is not isoelectric, and then it can dissolve in the solution when we prepare it, right? You're not gonna, administer insoluble insulin, right? So you prepare it at pH 4 such that it is soluble in the solution, and then you administer it. Now it's at pH 7.4, the pH of the blood, and then it's isoelectric, and there it's insoluble, and then it stays longer amount of time. Questions about this? Okay, so the other technique results from replacement of one of the amino acids, the ASN, the asparagine amino acid, with glycine, and the addition of 2 arginine amino acids at the end of the B chain. Why did we do that? We did this such that the resulting insulin will be isoelectric, which means it will have a net charge of 0. When something has a net charge of 0, then will it be more soluble or less soluble? Think of the ionized and unionized forms. It will be less soluble, so then it will stay longer in the body. Now, we also talk about the pH 4. So why did we manufacture this drug or store it at pH 4? So it's not crystal, right? Exactly, until you inject it. Make sense? Sure. Yeah. Yes. It will, yes, the pH of the blood, or our body, is 7.4. Subcutaneous, yes. All these are subcutaneous. Exactly. It does not dissolve, and then it will have a long duration of action. Everybody get that, guys? Can you raise your hand? Okay, good. So what other techniques? I think we're left with 2. There's one similar to the zinc, which has a positive charge, but it's not zinc. What is it? Protamine. So protamine is a protein. It is positively charged. If you combine it with insulin, which is negatively charged, then they combine together. The insulin will not dissolve, and then again, solubility is less. The drug stays longer. And then we are left with one technique. What is it? Fatty acids. By attaching a long chain of lipophilic fatty acids, we make the insulin less soluble. And there are 2 examples of this. One of them, the insulin determer, which adds, so in this case, we add 14 carbon myristic acid, a fatty acid, long chain, at the position 29. And then this will give us long-acting insulin. And then we have the ultra-long-acting insulin, which is resulting from the addition of the hexadecanoic acid, which I think is like 16 carbon to that part, to position 29 again. And this would cause the drug to be more lipophilic, so it does not dissolve. So all these concepts goes around the fact of solubility and making the drug, insoluble, so it stays longer in the body. But why are we trying to do that? Why do we care about making the drug stay longer in the body? it's more convenient, right? So the patient does not have to inject themselves continuously after each meal, okay? So it's all about convenience. And this figure here shows, you know, the regular insulin and the fast-acting one, and then the one with protamine and pH, and then the long-acting one. Okay, any questions about this so far? Was that clear, guys? Okay, do you want me to move to the next part? If you got everything clear, raise your hand so we can move to the next part. Okay. Okay, so the next part is, see, this is the one I told you about, secreta gugus, right? What? How do you say it? Gogs? Secreta gogs? Really? Oh my God. You're just like my kids. You make fun of my pronunciation.
Well, I've heard someone say that word.
Secreta gogs. Gogs. Okay.
I mean, that's how someone else pronounced it. That's not, I mean, I would have been like, God, wet, not wet. I don't know. I mean, I didn't have to figure that out. I just went to the long
Okay.
word and then someone said,
So what is the mechanism of action of these secretagogues? Thank you. Example is sulfonylurea. So they inhibit the potassium channel. We don't have to visit that because we already talked about that, right? So there are two kinds, the sulfonylurea and the megalitinides, which they both binds to the same, you know, binding site here, the sulfonylurea receptor, and they block the channel. And they, if you look at the structures, you will see that there's, you know, commonality, common features among them, which is the reason why they bind. Okay, next is the biguanides, metformin. These actually are insulin sensitizers. The mechanism is not really clear how, but they actually increase the sensitivity of our cells to the insulin, and therefore, even if your body, even like in the case of diabetes type 2, your body is not producing enough insulin, but then the cells are able to sense that insulin, so they respond. Okay. What is the side effect of metformin? The most common side effect? Lactic acidosis. Never forget this, okay? You're probably going to see this in one of the NAPLEX questions. Lactic acidosis. We have another example of insulin sensitizers, the PPAR agonists. Yeah. But these ones actually have caused lots of hepatotoxicity, and we only have the pioglitazone available. So you could read this by yourself. It shouldn't be a big deal. And then we have the alpha glucosidase inhibitors. So glucosidase is an enzyme that breaks the dimers. You know, when you have two glucose together, they form dimers, and so they break these dimers into glucose such that the body can absorb them. Okay. If we inhibit this enzyme, then glucose is going to stay inside our stomach. It's not going to be absorbed, and then it's just going to leave our body. Make sense? Okay. So guess what's the side effect of these drugs? You know, too much sugar in the stomach, it's not absorbed, it goes with the feces, leaves your body. What happens to the intestine?
could have osmotic diarrhea and bacterial overgrowth.
Yes.
But indigestion.
Indigestion, gas, you know, not able to control yourself, you know, you might like, it's nasty things. Okay. And I think the only example we have is the acarbose is the only one available. Okay. Now we have these GLP-1 agonists and the inhibitors. So we talked about the incretins, which stimulate insulin release and inhibit glucagon release. Let me point here so everyone can see. So mechanism of action for these incretins, they stimulate insulin release, they inhibit glucagon release, which is good, right? Because they lower the sugar. So we need more of these GLP-1. Okay, so we could design an agonist for that, or you could inhibit the breakdown of these incretins. There is an enzyme called DPP4, which inactivates these incretins. And so if you inhibit this enzyme with drugs like DPP4 inhibitors, then you will have these incretins stay longer in our body. Or you could actually synthesize something that is similar to these incretins. And I believe there is one example of two examples of these incretins. I'm sorry, GLP-1 analogs. So these are similar to the GLP-1. The exenatide, the brand name for it is Byetta, and the liraglutide, Victoza. So they are basically similar to the GLP-1, but they are enhanced, modified to be more stable. Okay, and in the case of the liraglutide, do you see this fatty chain? What's the purpose of this chain? Wanna guess? Increase the duration of action. Indeed, Byetta is given twice a day, but this new one, Victoza, is given once a day. Okay, so more convenient for patients.
The second one's given once a day?
Yes, Victoza is given once a day. Yes, because it has a fatty chain that makes it stay longer. I'm trying to see, I think one of these amino acids has been modified such that the drug is more stable. But anyway, so if we use the original, the natural endogenous GLP-1, it is not going to be as stable. It might be degraded quickly. So we have to modify the GLP-1 to actually make it produce something that is more stable, such as the exenatide or the liraglutide. Make sense, guys? And of course, the other way is to inhibit the enzyme that breaks down these incretins. Right. Any questions about these so far? The GLP-1 agonist and DPP4 inhibitors. Any questions? Any questions? No? Well, you look confused. So. No? Just sleepy? You've been studying for the CAT, right? Okay. Well, hopefully you'll feel comfortable after the review today and Sunday. So let me get one question, just, be sure. So you got the general idea of having incretins, and then you either design something similar to them, but then you have to stabilize them, right? So you modify the amino acids in a way such that they are more stable, they are not easily broken down. And we have seen an example where a fatty chain was added to make the drug stay longer in the body. Another way is look at the enzyme who breaks these incretins and then inhibit that enzyme. Okay. Well, if you get this 100%, can you raise your hand? Okay. And then the last one are the amylin agonists. What's the job of the amylin? Yes, John.
I had a sidebar, and I'll be quick.
Well,
Is
I mean,
glucagon negative feedback regulated? And if so, that might be why a glucagon-like protein might inhibit it.
I'm not sure, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I-
So,
I mean, it just.
yeah, I know. The name just like throws me off. Like glucagon, like you would think it's like a glucagon, but then glucagon is not.
Negative feedback, then that might
Maybe. Okay.
just click when I was trying to.
Sure. Okay.
Questions, I was like,
Well, I mean, your questions are like always at a higher level, so I'm like, I try to not embarrass myself. Yeah. Okay. Kendra has a question. Yeah. Yeah. So what does amylin do? Say it again. Do they break? Well, actually, they slow down the GI clearance, okay, such that the food stays longer in the body to absorb the glucose. I see your point now. I think it's something. Okay. Okay. Let me get back to you about this, guys. Okay. There's something missing in the amylin agonist. I don't understand. So I'll get back to you with this. Okay. So yes, you wanna explain it?
When I looked it up,
Yeah.
it still says the same thing on other websites about it slows down the yeah. No, it slows down the gastric excretion. Yeah, so I mean that's right for it. I just don't know how it helps.
Yes, right. I mean, you would want to do something that is, to antagonize that. Okay, so I will come back with the amylin agonists because there is something that does not make sense in the mechanism of action. If it slows down the absorption of the glucose, then, I mean, if it enhances absorption of glucose, then you want to design an antagonist. So let me read this part and get back to you. I'm sorry. I messed up twice today. You forgive me? Thank you. Okay, should we move to the next part? Do you need a break? Okay, so take a break and come back, and we'll start with the other ones. And then, the biphosphonate stuff. Okay, so let's start with the butterfly model. Okay, first of all, there's a typo in here. So this should be the A. So guys, please make sure you correct this in your note, okay? So this should say A. And this should say B. It's not my fault. This is what the book was saying. Okay, so in your notes, guys, this part here should be right, okay? Yes, and this should say is left. Okay? So we have effect of the calcitonin. And we have the effect of the pituitary hormone. I know you're gonna hate me, don't you? Okay. Okay, so let's start by this point here. When you have too much calcium, yes, sir.
You previously changed B to A, and now they're back to their original.
Yes, and then I changed left to right and right to left, and I'm sorry. Right, mistake number 3 today. Okay, so let's start by this point here. Too much calcium, okay, will enhance the release of the calcitonin, which leads to decrease in the bone resorption. So anytime we say bone resorption, think of bone being broken down. So the bone is broken down, calcium is released, okay? So calcitonin would reduce the bone resorption, and then it will also affect the intestine absorption. So it will also reduce the intestine, the absorption of the calcium. It will increase the excretion of the calcium, okay, in the renal. So at this side, we have like 3 factors: the bone, the absorption from the intestine, and the renal excretion. And we also have effect on vitamin D, okay? So vitamin D will also enhance the absorption from the intestine, okay? So calcitonin, when you have too much calcium, calcitonin works, and then you'll get all these effects: reduction in the bone resorption, reduction in the absorption of the calcium from the intestine, and increase in the excretion of the calcium from the kidney, okay? And the opposite happen when you have too little calcium. You have the pituitary hormone working, which would, do the opposite. Right. So the figures are already confusing and confusing you further. But anyway, so the factors that affect the calcium concentration in the blood are whether it's being absorbed from the intestine. Okay, so vitamin D helps the absorption of the calcium. Okay, more vitamin D means calcium is absorbed from the intestine and calcium gets higher in the blood. Okay, another factor is the excretion of the calcium in the kidney. Okay, and the third one is the breakdown of the bone. So as we know, bone is made of lots of calcium. So resorption means like breaking down the bone. So when it's broken, you get more of the calcium in the blood. 3 factors. And then of course, these factors are affected by 2 hormones. One is the calcitonin and the pituitary hormone. The calcitonin would enhance, would actually reduce, will end up having less calcium in our body. The pituitary hormone works against that. So again, I'm sorry, parathyroid hormone. I'm not doing well today. Yeah, I'm preparing for your cat. So parathyroid hormone, thank you, Kevin. So parathyroid hormone and the calcitonin, they work against each other. Questions about this? Yes. Excretion from the kidney. So the factors that we're looking at are the bone resorption, intestinal absorption, and kidney excretion. As far as the intestine absorption, it's affected by vitamin D. So vitamin D helps with the intestinal absorption. Well, so decrease in the vitamin D, decrease in the absorption. Here you have the opposite, increase in vitamin D, you have increase in intestinal absorption. Any questions, Melody?
Seems that there's the three ways, and one of them is vitamin D helps calcium to be absorbed from the intestine or from the intestine, which increases the blood.
Mhm.
Excretion of calcium from the kidney removes it from the blood.
Yes. Increase the calcium in the blood. Breakdown of the bone would make the calcium increase in the blood. Okay. Yeah. So the drugs we're going to see are going to impact calcitonin, the parathyroid hormone, and vitamin D. And we'll have also some calcium supplements, so to increase the calcium. Okay. So these are the factors that affects the calcium level in the blood. Okay. So I probably should have started by talking about osteoporosis, okay, which you have less calcium, and then our goal, osteoporosis, which is the bones become rigid. Weak. So our goal is to increase the calcium in the blood. So we have these methods. Yes, Melody. So by increasing the calcium, you help treating osteoporosis, increasing the calcium concentration in the blood. So increasing calcium concentration in the blood, increasing the calcium concentration will help with osteoporosis, treating osteoporosis. Questions? So far, so good? It's like, am I teaching you today? You are teaching me. Okay, this is how much I memorized from last year, okay? I tried to review it this morning, but I'm not doing a good job. Sorry. Okay, so when you have calcium excreted from the kidney, what happens to the concentration of the calcium in the blood? So when the calcium is excreted in the kidney, it decreases. Okay. So why are the estrogen analogs are called estrogen modulators instead of agonists or antagonists? Because they can act as an agonist and as an antagonist. How is that? Excellent. So can you repeat this?
Because the receptors have two different parts. They have the alpha and the beta, and the ER can bind both of them. So depending on which one they bind, that will determine if they're going to be antagonizing it or agonizing it.
You get that, guys? So we have different receptors at different parts of the body. The same drug can bind to one receptor and act as an agonist, stimulate that receptor. And again, the same drug or estrogen can bind at another receptor and act as an antagonist. Okay? So let me show you this table here. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea of how these estrogen modulators work on different parts of the body, okay? So at some parts, they work as an agonist, other parts, they work as an antagonist. That's why we call them estrogen modulators, okay? So when we try to, treat the osteoporosis, our goal at the bone is to increase the bone density, okay? And hopefully at the other parts like breast and uterine, we would like to reduce the stimulation of these estrogen, stimulation of the division of these cells. I should say that these estrogen receptors, they bind, they bind to intracellular receptors. They stimulate the production of other cells. So they stimulate the cell division, okay? So that's the side effect of these drugs. That's why estrogen therapy, for example, can cause breast cancer and uterine cancer, right? It's because they stimulate the production of more of these cells than the cancer can develop, okay? Now, an ideal drug for osteoporosis, hopefully, would increase the bone marrow density and antagonize, the breast and uterine, and basically not cause cancer, okay? It would also, normally these also affect the lipid profile, meaning they affect the level of the lipid in the blood. So hopefully they should enhance lipid profile. And when I say here, increase lipid profile, I don't mean that they increase the cholesterol or lipid in the blood. I mean they improve the lipid profile, meaning that they reduce the cholesterol and triglycerides, okay? Do you want to make this part, there's like for your own education? Just like not in the exam, but discuss it today and we learn together? Yeah? Okay. So not the anti-diabetic part, but this part, the osteoporosis, we'll talk about it, for the remaining of the class, but this would be for our own education, okay? So it's not for the exam. So try to think, as a pharmacist, you want to learn about these things, and because as you know, you are responsible for your own education, right? So then, ask me questions. Hopefully, if I remember from last year, I'll be able to answer. If not, then you're going to teach me, okay? Anyway, so this is more relaxing, right? Okay, so now you should think in a different way, not the exam, but think of why you need to know this, okay? So as you know, all these birth controls and anything that has estrogen, they can end up causing, cancers. Why? Because these drugs, they bind to the DNA intracellular receptors. Remember the type of receptors? Some of them were called intracellular. These intracellular receptors, they bind to the DNA, stimulate the synthesis of the proteins and the division of the cell. So when you have more of this stimulation, then it causes cancer. At the same time, we needed these estrogens to help increase the bone density, because we know, or we don't know the mechanism, but we know that the estrogen is responsible for enhancing the bone density. That's why osteoporosis develop in the first place, because we have less of estrogen, okay? So then we use the insulin replacement therapy. So we have some of these drugs that are selective, okay? I think the best one was, let's see. If I remember correctly, I think the best one was this one. Well, no, because look, some of them affect the cancer. Look at these See, these reduce the cancer, this increase the cancer, right? So the best one would be, I think, this one, the base doxyphene, okay? It has, the best features where it actually, act on the enhancing the bond density. At the same time, they block or they inhibit the, division of the cells in the breast and uterus, so they prevent the cancer. Okay, can they be used as anti-cancer? Yeah, they can. So you will see, for example, tamoxifen used in breast cancer. Okay. All right. So you have to come up with questions because I'm not sure where I'm missing. So we get the parts how estrogen is important in enhancing the bond density, right? That's why osteoporosis developed in the first place for, women who, get less of the estrogen post-menopause, okay? So estrogen replacement, but then we have issues with the estrogen because it can bind to receptors in different modes at different parts, and one part as an agonist, another part as an antagonist, right? So we have all these different kinds of drugs. Some of them act as an agonist or antagonist. Our goal is to design something that would help with the bond density, but not cause cancer. And of course, all these side effects of the cardiovascular, the lipid profile, and the cross of the blood-brain barrier and causing hot flashes and all that. Is that clear? Okay. Say it again. Sure. Yeah, I'll share this with you, okay? Questions? You get this part? Raise your hand. Okay, good. So what is this part about? The too much cylinders in here, right? What's going on in here? Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see. What is that? Huh? So this shows two different drugs binding to the same receptor, okay? One drug acts as an agonist, one acts as an antagonist, okay? And it has to do with the induced fit. Remember the induced fit, guys, we talked about? So this, if you can tell the difference, causes some induced fit that produces the agonist. This one blocks the induced fit and act as an antagonist. And these cylinders, what are these cylinders here? Remember the alpha sheets, alpha helices, beta sheets? So the alpha helices, they're represented by these cylinders. Okay, so just, we already know how the agonist antagonist work as far as the, induced fit, so. Yeah, trying to pick the most important thing for you guys. Okay, any questions about estrogen modulators? Yes, ma'am. Say it again. Oh, pure anti-estrogen. Okay. So when you have something that acts as an antagonist, hold on, pure anti-estrogen. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So we have full agonist, right? And we have partial, and we have antagonists. So pure antagonists mean they have full antagonist effect, okay? So they're not partial, because some of these drugs are partial. Speaking of partial, you just remind me of something. Now you will see that some of these drugs, they act as partial agonists. And again, they are also partial agonist means partial antagonist. So depending on if you have less amount of estrogen, right? So you could actually give these partial agonists to treat someone who has no estrogen, right? At the same time, if you have someone with a cancer, you have too many, like divisions and the, production of the estrogen, then you could use the same drug, which is a partial antagonist, but this time you're using it as a partial antagonist to block estrogen. Just like we saw with the CNS analgesics, remember? We had a partial agonist, partial antagonist. We had, to treat someone who's addicted to the, opioids. So it act as a partial agonist. And then we also used it to save someone's life as a partial antagonist. So remember the example of the half full, half empty cup. Okay, now why are you confused now? This is just should be for fun, right? It's not part of the exam or anything, right? You still look confused. Okay. Should we move to the next part, the biphosphonates? No? Okay. So ask questions then about the estrogen replacement therapy. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh. Yes. Right. You mean like they get osteoporosis? This is a very good question. Guys, the question is, so for females, we know that they get osteoporosis because of low level of estrogen. So for males, why do they get osteoporosis? Of course, we know that, they're less likely to do that, but why do they do this? And I do not know the answer, but that's a very good question. Does anybody know why? Adisha? Yeah, okay, but why is it that they don't have like what breaks the balance between osteoclast and osteoblast? What is it? They're not. Okay, so maybe someone can look that up. Any questions? Questions about this part? No? Say it again. I don't know. I was just saying I don't know the answer. Okay, biphosphonates. You guys have seen in the pharmacy the Boniva and what else? The one that Actonel is a third one. It's given once weekly. Fosamax. You guys have seen the Fosamax, Boniva, and the Actonel, right? They're taken once a week or once a month in the case of Boniva. These are examples of the biphosphonate, okay? So I can't remember the mechanism of action now. You want to say it, Cheryl?
Oh, so basically there's three mechanisms for bisphosphonates, and the first one is it binds to the calcium and the phosphates in the bone and stabilizes it. The second one is it decreases osteoclast so that the bone resorption size are also decreases. And the third one is that it has a non-hydrolyzable backbone, which means it has a longer duration of action than the natural one.
Thank you so much. Was that clear, guys? You better say yes. Okay, so why did we replace the oxygen with the carbon here? Because it's more stable, okay? It's not hydrolyzable. So the oxygen here is like an ester. And think of this as an ester. So phosphatase can break this, but when you have a carbon, it does not, so it's more stable. Okay. Okay, let's go to the fun part. So what is the inconvenience in taking these bisphosphonate or biphosphonate? Bisphosphonate, let's just say bisphosphonate. So the side effect is esophagitis, right? Why? Why does esophagitis can develop? I mean, they're acidic. I mean, they can cause, problems with the esophagus if they are not absorbed, if they are not swallowed completely, okay? So that's the major side effect. Now, to avoid this side effect, there is certain instructions that these drugs should be taken, to avoid that the pill would be stuck in the esophagus. What are these instructions? Drink lots of water. What else? Stay up for about what? 30 minutes. So you're gonna stay up still, sitting or standing for 30 minutes. What else? Don't drink or eat for how long? 30 minutes to an hour. Okay. What else? So take it first thing in the morning on empty stomach. Okay, so when you first wake up in the morning, do not have breakfast for 1 hour. Okay, and sit still for 1 hour. Do not go anywhere. Do not lie down. How convenient is this? Right? Which is the reason why these drugs are designed to be taken once a week. So you have, or once a month. So you don't have to suffer that much, okay? So you only have to deal with this maybe on a weekend. So take it, follow all these instructions on a weekend only, and, avoid, any activities like, don't eat for an hour, take it with full glass of water. Again, why do we have to follow these instructions? To make sure the pill does not stop in the esophagus. If it does, it can cause esophagitis. No, it's not about, see, that's a good question. I was gonna say, why don't we do this with the other pills? Because every pill will have the chance, if you lie down and don't swallow very well, any pill can get stuck in the esophagus, right? But it's not gonna cause the problems this drug can cause, okay? So you could think of these instructions and apply it at any time you take, a drug to make sure it's not stuck in the esophagus. But with this particular one, if it does get stuck in the esophagus, you get the side effect of esophagitis, which is, very bad. So to avoid this, you want to follow these instructions. Okay? Make sense, guys? Yes, somebody has a question? No? So also in the instructions, it says that you should avoid taking this medication, well, of course, with food, but then you should avoid to take it with any, supplements, antacids, which has what? Calcium or positively charged ions or metals. Because why? What's the charge on these bisphosphonates? Negative. So if you take it with a food that has calcium or calcium supplement or antacid, like aluminum hydroxide, calcium hydroxide, they can form complexes with this bisphosphonate, and what happens? They prevent their absorption. Okay. Okay, good. So why do we have Fosamax or aldactone plus calcium then? Right? Have you seen it at the pharmacy? Aldactone D plus calcium. Well, we're not supposed to take it with calcium, right? How does this work? I like to confuse you sometimes and shock you, but then get you excited and then give you the answer, right? Okay, look at this. Actonel with calcium. And the answer is actually on the same page. So I'm gonna let you take a minute and read. Can you see it? How often is Actonel is taken alone without the calcium? Once a week, right? When you take it with calcium, how often do you take it? Do you still take it once a week? So I see 7 days calendar in there. You actually take it every day. But guess what? You have 1 day that has the Actonel tablet, and the 6 days has the calcium. Okay? So on that day of the week, you know, call it a weekend, a Saturday or Sunday, then you're gonna follow all these horrible instructions of taking the Actonel, which would be only Actonel alone without calcium. But then on the rest of the week, you will take calcium, and you can take it anyhow you want. Make sense? Okay. And then there's also, you know, Actonel plus D, you know, just Fosamax D. Okay. So I'm only picking the information that you really need as a pharmacist. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna switch the parathyroid hormone and the calcitonin. The only thing about the calcitonin is it's given sub-Q, IV, or nasal spray because it's a protein, and protein cannot be taken orally, right? Why don't we take insulin orally? It degrades from, you know, from the enzymes and the acids in your stomach. So anytime we have a protein, just like the anti-diabetic drugs, Byeda and all these drugs, Victoza, they are protein, so they're always given, you know, subcutaneous. Okay. One day I'm gonna discover the oral insulin. You're laughing now, but you'll see me in the news. Except if I have to remember a few things first. Okay. Vitamin D. So let's look at vitamin D. Well, believe it or not, this is a project I'm working on, oral insulin. Anybody interested? I don't have money to pay you though. You'll have to do this for free. But then once you win the Nobel Prize, then I'm gonna share it with you. Don't forget us, that's right. Well, you're gonna help me with my research first. Okay. Say it again. How? Excellent. Thank you. Oh, you got me excited now. You know how so you have the insulin, insulin receptor, and you have the insulin that binds to the receptor, right? So the idea is, is to design a drug that would bind to the receptor and produce the same conformational, you know, induced fit that insulin causes, okay, and stimulate the signal transduction.
So you're saying instead of like that, you make a molecule that fits but survives.
Yes, so like a small molecule that's going to bind to the receptor and makes the receptor, stimulate the receptor to give the same effect like the insulin. So you have to study the conformation change what happens when the insulin binds to the receptor. There is a method called MD simulation, molecular dynamics simulation. So you simulate how the insulin binds to the receptor and watch the conformation change, okay? And then hopefully differentiate it from other conformations when another drug, let's say a negative control, binds, produce a different conformation fit. Once you understand the conformation change, then hopefully you would design something. Are you interested? I'm damn serious, yes. I know, it's challenging, but Anyway, so let's talk about vitamin D. Okay, so vitamin D has the structure of, it's actually derived from cholesterol. Okay, we have cholesterol, and then when the skin is exposed to the the sun, you get vitamin D3. That's one way of getting vitamin D3. Okay, another way is you could actually get D3 from the diet. Okay, or you could also get D2 from plants, again from the diet. So you get D2 or D3 as an external resource. And then once you get to this stage, whether from the sun stimulating the synthesis of vitamin D3, or if you get it externally, then there is an enzyme in the liver called 25-hydroxylase, which will add hydroxyl to position 25. So now you have hydroxyl here, okay? So here there is no hydroxyl. Well, some people cannot see that. So, so here you have OH group being added to this position 25. So now you have the 25-hydroxy vitamin D, which is calcifdiol. So I think the easiest one to get the the structure is by looking at the names. You have diol, means like they have two OHs. Here you have one OH, okay, and then you have another OH here, which is calciftriol, okay. This one is inactive, this one is inactive, and that's the only active one, the calciftriol. Okay, guys? So when you get vitamin D2 or D3 at the pharmacy, have you seen these, D2, D3? Okay, they come in over the counter, they come in smaller units. Does anybody remember how many units? 200, 500, but then the prescription strength is 5,000, 50,000. Is it? I can't remember the strength. Anyway, so higher strength, of course, will be a prescription. So you could actually use D2 or D3. They both do the same thing, okay? And then the liver will convert it into the calcifdiol, which is still inactive. And then in the kidney, it's converted into the calcitriol, which is the active form. Okay? So it's just good to know that all these forms are inactive and they have to be activated. So you could get that either, we could rely on the sun to convert this cholesterol into D3, or you could take this externally from outside. Say it again. We cannot get the active form. Yeah, why don't we just take the active form immediately, right? Why don't we take just the D instead of the D2 or 3? I'm trying to look at the answer here, but my guess would be, stability, but I don't see it here. Okay, so my guess, if you take this, it's going to go through the liver. It will be deactivated into the 1,24,25 trihydroxy, which is inactive. So if you get this, it will go through the liver. Remember, you took it orally, it goes to the first pass effect, and then the 25-hydroxylase, there is another enzyme, which is 24-hydroxylase, will give you the inactive form. So by taking, it's like it's like a prodrug, then it's actually converted into the active form. This is my guess. Okay. You like that? Good. Questions about this? Hmm? Yeah, of course. Thank you. So guys, anytime we rely on the liver or the kidney to activate a drug, then if somebody has kidney problems or liver problems, guess what? We should look for alternative drugs, okay? Because they might not have the enzyme responsible to activate the prodrug. That's a good point, thank you. In fact, we will see many examples like that where, precaution, somebody who has, kidney failure or, liver failure, then we should avoid the drugs that rely on enzymes to be activated. Can you give the drug with the enzyme together? So if you take it orally, enzyme is a protein, so it's a problem. Yeah. You can give it sub-Q, yeah, sure. But then inconvenience is a problem. See, I mean, orally are the best route of administration. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm sure we could see examples like this, but. And then finally, we have the calcium salts. There are 3-4 different kinds. We have, calcium citrate, lactate, gluconate, and calcium carbonate. And calcium carbonate is the cheapest form, okay, but it is poorly soluble. The citrate, lactate, and gluconate are more expensive, but they are more soluble. These are the main, I guess, tips I want you to get from this lecture as a pharmacist. The rest, if you forget, it's fine, but I think these are important. So this concludes this part, which, like we said, is for your own education. So please ask me questions about anything, estrogen therapy, the bisphosphonate, all these drugs that had to be taken in a certain way, and vitamin D, calcium salts. Anything about that? Yes, Kevin. Calcium acetate. I'm not sure really. I'm not really sure. I'm trying to think of an example of, which one? Fazlo. It's a calcium acetate. Okay. I'm really not sure, but I'll tell you, for example, the antacid, calcium hydroxide, besides the fact that it, reduces the acid of the stomach, it can actually be used to help with the calcium, but it will have problem with the absorption, just like calcium carbonate. Okay. Questions? Yes. Which one? Calcium castle? Okay, so the question is the only way to get vitamin D is through D2 or 3, and are there the active form be given? As far as I know, it's D2 or 3. I haven't seen any, the active form. If you do, please share it with me, and I'll make sure to let everybody know. Okay, sure. Very good question. Yes, sir.
So in the pharmacy, I've seen vitamin D, 50,000 units.
Yes.
You're supposed to take that once a week.
Yeah, good point. So, you will learn about these later on, but I have seen it from my experience. They they take it like the first day or two. I think the first 3 days they take one every day, but then once a week. But don't quote me, please, because yeah, I can't remember it. But you're right. So the 50,000 units, initially, I think they take it once a day for some time, and then it's just once a week. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Vitamin D? Well, yes, for the, in this case, to help with the, you know, the bone density, it is. If they don't need it, should they take it? I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure. I mean, it's good to have multivitamin, that wouldn't hurt, right? Because these vitamins, most of them are soluble. So if your body has enough of them, they will just be excreted. And then if you are missing something, your body will benefit from it. Yes, sir. Side effects? I can't think of any. I mean, there might, but I can't think of any side effects. Okay, so I'm planning to go through the exercises for this part. So let's go through them together. And I mean, especially the anti-diabetes, see that you guys were able to, you know, cover all the concepts. Looking at the time. So we will do review on this session, I mean, today's lecture, and then we'll start the review in the CAT. So do you want to have a break, come back and review these together? And then you're welcome to bring your lunch, whatever. And then we'll have another break and start the review in the CAT. You want to do that? Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, so like take 10 minutes break and then come back, and then I'll bring exercises that I have about the anti-diabetic drugs, just to make sure we have that covered, okay? And then we'll start reviewing the CAT, okay? Correct, yes. So guys, anti-diabetic drugs portion, this will be part of the final, okay? But the osteoporosis, anything about osteoporosis, this is for your own education, okay? It's not, you know, on the final or any other exam, just for your own, you know, education.
So do we know the